Good morning, Vic. How are you this morning?
Oh, great, great. Nice and warm.
As I mentioned, you've been around in the dog world since the mid-1900s. When did you actually start?
Well, I suppose when I was a young fellow, being associated with my dogs, my mother and father bred pugs. After I was discharged in the Navy, I forget what year, early 50s, I've been married 60 years next April, right? And just after we got married, my wife said, I'd like a dog, but I don't want one of those snorting pugs that your mum and dad's got. I said, what would you like? She said, I'd like a Cocker Spaniel. Hence, that was it. Purchased a few dogs, not successful. Then I paid a big price for a dog, an adult dog, 25 guineas, top price, big money. That set me on my way, because it wasn't long after having this dog I won my first Best in Show under a judge named Sidingham, who was a Great Dane breeder. It was only a parade, which they were called in those days, but I went Best in Show at the Gundog and Heavy Breeds Club with 197 dogs, which at the time was a record entry.
And that was across all breeds?
No, Gundog and Heavy Breeds, which was group 3, 4, 5. We only had 5 groups in those days.
And that was, what year was that roughly?
It must have been about 54.
And you continued showing through until you became a judge, or?
Well, no, as a matter of fact, in those days, Henry Phillips, the president of the Canine Control Council, seen me at the dog show, and he asked me what was my ambitions in the dog world. I said, God, that's a good question. I don't know. I really haven't thought about it. He said, have you ever thought of being a judge? I said, vaguely. He says, well, why don't you put an application in to be a judge? So I applied to become a Cocker Spaniel judge. Never had a judges board in those days. You fronted the council, and most of the councillors were terriers blokes, and they sat around asking questions, and subsequently I passed. Henry come to me and he says, you only did Cocker Spaniels? I said, yes. He said, what's the use of that? He said, you'll only judge 2 shows. He says, you might do one here and you might do one in Sydney, and you're going to be awfully lucky if you get to Melbourne. He says, do the group. So I sat down and told him I wanted to do the balance of the group. Now, in 1957, I started to judge. I judged my first all breeds open show, or parade in those days, which was in 1958, and that was the Nambour Kennel Club. That was my first all breed show. Keeping in mind, there wasn't as many dogs as there are now, not as many breeds, and there was only 5 groups. It didn't take me long to become an all breeds judge.
How many shows would have been held in any one year back in those days?
Most of the shows held in Brisbane were held on a Saturday. The only shows held on a Sunday would have been Redcliffe, possibly Ipswich, and Waterloo Bay, because they were held at Greens Park opposite the Waterloo Hotel down at Wynnum. Most of the shows were then held in the old R&A kennels on a Saturday. Mostly Saturday afternoon. Very few started at 9 o'clock in the morning. Let me think. There wasn't a show every weekend.
How about in the country? Were there shows in the country at that stage?
Yeah, there were shows at some of the agricultural shows. Let me see. A lot of them were only parades, because I've still got a catalogue, or it's a schedule, of the Oakey Golden Jubilee show held in 1958, and it was an all breeds parade.
And how many shows did you actually judge at in that period? Because I guess there weren't many judges around either.
No, there wasn't as many judges around. I really can't recall how many I judged, but I judged sufficient. You know, if I judged one every couple of months, most judges were happy. And in fact, I don't know very many other people would have a licence to judge. I still got 2 Canine Control Council written on the front, licence to judge. And in one, it says, can judge any 2 championship shows in the metropolitan area only. I couldn't judge 2 groups in the country. I could judge 1, but I could judge 2 championship shows, any 2 groups, when I was over in the metropolitan area only.
Now we're sitting out at Durack, which is the Dogs Queensland showgrounds. This has been here, for 20 odd years now. Where were the shows mainly held in those days?
Most of them were held in the Canine Control, in the R&A building. And then there was a few more outdoor shows, but most of them. These grounds were purchased in 1980 and they cost $90,000, and we've got 52 acres of land here.
Now it's a beautiful showgrounds, I must say. Now going back to the R&A, those you're talking about the shows being held in a hall there. It wasn't the Wadley building, was it?
No, it wasn't. No, it was held in closed kennels, and the shows were mostly on a Saturday, and it just progressed from there. And it was always the ambition of the control to have their own grounds.
And were you actually still showing yourself at this stage?
Yes, I was showing right up to probably 1982.
So I notice one of your daughters and granddaughters actually handles out here at the showgrounds now.
Well, I've got a daughter that handles a number of breeds of dogs, Cocker Spaniels and English Setters. I've got a granddaughter that shows Golden Retrievers. I've got a grandson that's in the Terrier group. He did have Jack Russells, now stabled at my place. He's had Fox Terriers. He's still got a couple of those, but he's now got an American imported Welsh Terrier, and he's switching over to that breed.
So do you have much input into the what dogs your descendants actually handle now and have?
No, I don't have much to say about what they have, but I'm still top cocky.
I guess you are. Looking at you, you're still getting around the showground, no trouble at all.
Well, I only live 5 minutes from these grounds, and I'm here at good 70 to 80% of the shows.
Now, I understand also you were on the Canine Control Council at some stage. Can you tell us about the early days in terms of, I think it was 1953, we had the combination of the 2 existing clubs at that time became the Canine Control Council of Queensland.
Yeah, well, that's right. There was 3 controls at the time. There was the Queensland Kennel Council, QKC. There was the Kennel Control, that's the Kennel Association rather, the KA, and the Canine Board of Control. Now when they called the meeting, I wasn't around at this time, but I do know the history of it. When they called a meeting to meet the R&A about affiliation, the Canine Board of Control did not turn up. But strangely enough, in 1957 or 58, the Canine Board of Control had their final show held in the school grounds, not the parking area, of the Valley School in Brook Street. And I won the gun dog group.
Oh, so you were there at the beginning.
And the judge was a fellow by the name of Harold D. Voss.
Harold D. Voss. Okay, now, since those days, how has Dogs Queensland progressed?
I think over the years with the association they had with the R&A, which was great for the CCC because we never had a secretary. The R&A supplied the secretary. we paid a certain amount to the RNA secretarial fees, and we could never repay the RNA for the work that we've got, because we built up a bank account. The money that we had when we purchased these grounds, we paid cash for it, still had nearly $1 million in the bank, and I think that a lot of people nowadays don't realise the assistance that the RNA did give us. So, you know, we've got a lot to thank to the RNA, and of course now, we've got our first election to go Democratic, and yes, I think it's something that had to be progress, and it had to come sooner or later.
Now, going back to the days when you were actually on the council itself, when did that begin?
I joined the council in 1980. I was probably the last one that was just invited by the committee. One of the things that I put forward to council when I got in there was that I was always supporting democracy, was that we should have some sort of, instead of just picking someone out of the blue like they've done with me and everyone else, so we started calling for nominations. And I can remember the first lot we had I think around about 18 people nominated. There was some, we vetted them. Of the 18, we got it down to 10. We were only going to put on 2 councillors. When we got it down to 10, we said, right, let's get it down to 5. It was all a secret ballot, incidentally, we did it. And when we got it down to 5, we made a selection of 2. And that's how it was done on the council. But nowadays, it's fully elected body. I retired from the council in 2001, I think it was. I spent 21 years on the council anyhow.
And you saw great progress in that time, obviously.
Yes, I think the great progress really was the purchase of Durack, and that was purchased just as I joined, and one of the things Henry said, well, we need a new subcommittee, and I was made chairman of the grounds subcommittee. And before these grounds opened, I was growing trees on this ground, and some of the big trees that you see down around yonder, and the people are sitting under them getting shade, I planted. I did have some help with a lot of the trees. I had a working bee, and I used to get the plants, and we'd dig the holes and put the trees in. So there was a lot of other people too helping out there. Most of them have disappeared. One good worker, of course, that helped me was Margaret was Lotter. What's her name now? Margaret, anyhow, Margaret Lotter. Everyone knows her as Margaret Lotter. She was a good worker and grew a lot of trees too.
And what about the future? Where do you see the future for Dogs Queensland?
Well, unfortunately, it's a worldwide thing. Dogs are dropping off. I don't think it'll get much worse than what we are now, and I think it'll start to grow up again. One of the long-range plans, and I probably won't see it in my time, is that Henry asked me at the time to draw up a plan for Durack. I drew up a plan, took it to council, and I remember Jack Ulrich, one of the councillors, he said, I hope those lights you got on there are only for decorations. Well, of course, now we're floodlit. But the area we got over the road, I had marked as a future covered ring area. And I hope in time that if they ever build covered rings, that's where they are. They'll never do away with our lawns, because it's great to have shows outdoors.
Talking about going back to dogs themselves, you've seen a great improvement in the various breeds of dogs over the years?
Yes, at one time we had a few good dogs, we had a lot of mediocre dogs, and we had a few poorer quality dogs. We went through a high, like everyone did, through the 70s and the 80s, where we had a lot of top quality dogs. We had a lot of middle class dogs and very few poorer class dogs. We've lost a lot of good dogs. We've lost a lot of good breeders. I see a lot of the breeds have deteriorated. I'm not going to know which ones, but in my opinion, I think that a lot of them have deteriorated. We at one time had top quality, in the gun dog group, Irish setters. There's hardly any breeders about nowadays, but we had some of the best in Australia.
Back in those early days, which were the popular breeds?
Now, of course, always German Shepherds, Corgis, they were popular. Fox Terriers were very strong, wire Fox Terriers were strong, Scottish Terriers were very strong in the Terrier group. What else would have been strong in the Terrier group? That's covered probably the most, and Aussie Terriers were very strong. You know, we had a lot of breeders with Aussie Terriers. The toys, a lot of peak breeders, a lot of Silky Terrier breeders. Let me see. Well, we had a lot of odds and ends throughout there, but really a lot of peak breeders and Silky Terriers. Group 3 always had Cocker Spaniels, Labradors, Golden Retrievers. Golden Retrievers in those days, very rarely you'd see a light-coated one. The people wouldn't keep the light, they were sold as pets. But the standard does say any shade of cream, but the old breeders never kept them.
Now I notice around the rings these days there are a lot of junior handlers. Did you have many in those days?
Well, we used to have what we called tiny tot handlers, and one of the silliest things I feel that council ever did was that one day in the old kennels, and the ground used to be decomposed granite, what they used to have on tennis courts, remember? That was the surface. And a young girl that was only about 7 took a German Shepherd in the ring, and it ran out of the ring to the owner in the assembly ring and dragged her across the ring and gave her a severe gravel rash. Council immediately reacted and said no one under 10 can handle a dog. And subsequently for many years we were the only state in Australia, in fact the world, that never had 7-year-olds handling dogs. I'm glad to see that it's changed.
Yes, they've changed it this year, and now we've got the 7 to under 10 age group, and it's very popular.
That's right. And you know, how many people to even before this came in used to just go over the border to show their dogs that clashed here because they had kids handlers. The parents took them down there for the little kids to show dogs. I think it's a great thing that we now changed.
And thinking of other activities within the dog world, did you have the earth dogs and obedience?
No,
and those disciplines?
The earth dogs came in. That was started by Tom Morrow and a terrier fella. I can't think of his name. Forget it. But no, I can't think of his name. But once Jack Russells were registered and as an accepted breed with the ANKC, and they were started here in Queensland, and other states then followed on.
And we've got
Ken Eggleton is the other fellow.
Okay, and we've got the other activities as well. The agility is very popular and very spectator friendly.
It is. I would like to see sometime in the future that they could have, and I picture the month of October, and you call it a Dogtoberfest, falling in the name, you know, and have something like what we used to have, the wonderful world of dogs that we had at the RNA. I think this is a great venue. I put it to council at one time, but I just couldn't convince a number of them that the argument was nobody had travelled this far to see it. That's ridiculous. I'd like to see a day like that where you've got fly ball, agility, we've got the room, have stalls, you invite the people, these United Nations people, you know, that all the groups we've got here, food stalls, you charge them a fee. But what you do to make it successful, like we used to do it before, the profits
the dogs.
went. And what we did, we invited the Lions Club, a branch of the Lions Club, and they supplied all the parking attendants and everything like that. We could still do exactly the same thing. And what the dog world needs is some things like that, just away from dog shows. You have your kennels, breeds decorated and everything like that. You have somebody from Lions go around and give a prize. To the public will come. The thing is this, you're doing something for charity. You're giving your advertising Dogs Queensland. People will come in. We've got the area to park. And I think it's something that the council...
I was thinking along the lines also of perhaps down the track some sort of a state of origin for the dog world, whether it's agility or something else.
Yes, I can't see any reason why they can't do something with their agility. I think that's a great idea. I've always, I've had maintained once before that Durack should have a Durack agility club operating on these grounds, and they could hold their trials the same day as we have shows.
Well, it's been very interesting talking to you this morning, Vic, and I thank you very much.
And thank you very much for asking me such informative questions.
Thank you.